In 1960, a single Canadian dollar could buy you 20 chocolate bars. A gallon of gas cost 35 cents, which means $3 filled your entire tank. A movie ticket was 75 cents. A full restaurant meal was under $2. And the average house in Toronto cost $13,000, which you could pay off in 5 years on a single income working at a factory. That same dollar today buys you less than one chocolate bar. Gas is over $1.50 per liter. Movie tickets are $18. Restaurant meals are $30 minimum, and that Toronto house now costs $1.2 million, requiring two incomes and 30 years of debt to afford. Here's what should terrify you about these numbers. The purchasing power of a dollar collapsed by 95% in just 65 years. The money your grandparents used to buy houses and raise families on single incomes now barely covers your coffee budget. This is what inflation actually looks like when you stop thinking about percentages and start looking at what money could actually buy. Let me show you exactly what $1 bought in 1960 Canada and why those prices reveal an economic reality that makes modern life impossible by comparison. In 1960, you walked into a bakery with $1 and walked out with 5 loaves of fresh bread. Not bargain bread, not day-old bread, fresh bakery bread that cost 19 cents per loaf. Your dollar bought enough bread to feed a family for a week. That same dollar today buys you 1/3 of a loaf. Store-brand bread costs $3 minimum. Bakery bread costs $5 to $6. You need $15 to buy what $1 bought in 1960. The math is insane. Bread prices increased 1,500%, while wages definitely did not increase 1,500%. But here's what this reveals about real inflation. The government says inflation averaged 3 to 4% annually since 1960. If that were true, bread should cost about $1.50 today based on compounding. Instead, it costs $3 to $6. Either the inflation measurements are lying or bread specifically got hit with extra price increases that official statistics ignore. The answer is both. Official inflation numbers exclude food and energy price volatility. They measure core inflation, which deliberately ignores the things people actually buy every day. Your bread costs 15 times more than the government's inflation model says it should. That gap is the difference between statistical inflation and actual cost of living. In 1960, gas stations across Canada sold regular gasoline for 35 cents per gallon. That's about 8 cents per liter in modern units. Your dollar bought nearly 3 gallons of gas. A typical car had a 15-gallon tank, which cost $5 to fill completely. $5. People complained if gas hit 40 cents. Gas costs $1.60 to $1.80 per liter depending on the province. A gallon is roughly 3.8 liters, which means you're paying $6 to $7 per gallon. That same tank that cost $5 in 1960 now costs $90 to $100 to fill. The price increased 1,800% while your wages definitely didn't. But here's the insane part about this specific price. Gas is one of the few things where you can directly compare apples to apples across decades. It's the same product refined from oil using similar processes. The dramatic price increase isn't because gas got better. It's pure inflation plus taxation. In 1960, there were minimal gas taxes. The 35 cents you paid was mostly actual fuel cost. Today, approximately 40% of what you pay is federal and provincial taxes. You're paying $1.80 per liter where 70 cents is tax. If you remove taxes, gas would cost about $1.10 per liter. Still triple the inflation-adjusted price, but the gap would be smaller. Here's what this means practically. In 1960, a worker earning $3 per hour could buy 8 gallons of gas with 1 hour of work. Today, a worker earning $20 per hour can buy 3 gallons with 1 hour of work. Your labor buys less gas now despite earning nominally more money. That's how inflation destroys purchasing power. Going to the cinema in 1960 cost 75 cents for adults and 25 cents for children. Your dollar bought you a movie ticket with 25 cents left over for candy. A family of four could see a movie for under $3 total. Movies were entertainment for working-class families, not luxury experiences. A movie ticket in Canada costs $15 to $20 depending on the city and theater. IMAX or premium formats cost $25 to $30. A family of four now spends $60 to $80 minimum just on tickets. Movie theaters in 1960 made money by selling tickets. Concessions were cheap because they wanted you to come often. Today, theaters make almost nothing on tickets because studios take 50 to 70% of revenue. The entire business model flipped. In 1960, movies were the product and concessions were accessories. Today, concessions are the product and movies are just the excuse to get you in the door. This isn't inflation. This is a complete restructuring of the economic model disguised as inflation. Pantry and coffee. Fast food was even cheaper. A McDonald's hamburger cost 15 cents. Fries were 10 cents. A milkshake was 20 cents. You could eat a complete McDonald's meal for 45 cents. McDonald's meals cost $10 to $15. A Big Mac alone cost $7. The restaurant meal that cost $2 in 1960 now costs $40. That's a 2,000% increase. The Big Mac that cost 15 cents now costs 700 cents. That's a 4,500% increase. Food costs haven't increased 2,000%. Labor costs have. In 1960, restaurant workers earned $1.25 per hour, and that was enough to live on. Today, restaurant workers earn $17 per hour minimum wage and can't afford rent. Today, that same meal costs about 100 minutes of minimum wage work. That $1.25 per hour paid for housing, food, and a car. Today, $17 per hour pays for rent if you have 3 roommates. The meal ratio stayed constant while everything else exploded. The average new car in 1960 Canada cost about $2,500. That's for a full-size Ford or Chevrolet with V8 engine, bench seats, and radio. Compact cars cost under $2,000. Today, the average new car in Canada costs $45,000. That same worker now earning $20 per hour needs 2,250 hours of work to buy a car. The purchasing power gap is catastrophic. But here's the defense of modern car prices. A 1960 car had no airbags, no ABS, no electronic stability control, no fuel injection, no air conditioning, no power windows. Modern cars are objectively better products. So let's compare base model to base model. A Chevrolet Biscayne with manual transmission and minimal features cost $2,200. Today, a Chevrolet Spark with manual transmission and minimal features costs $15,000. That's still a 580% increase after adjusting for actual improvements. The car got better, but not 6 times better. The price increased faster than the value. This is where the math becomes absolutely devastating. The average house in Toronto costs $13,000. The average annual salary was about $4,200. A house costs 3 times annual salary. A couple with one working spouse could buy a house, and if they saved aggressively, pay it off in 7 to 10 years. Today, the average Toronto house costs $1.2 million. The average salary is about $60,000. That house now costs 20 times annual salary. Even with 2 incomes at $120,000 combined, the house costs 10 times household income. You need a 30-year mortgage that consumes 40% of your income, and you'll pay $800,000 in interest alone. But here's the obscene comparison. In 1960, a factory worker earning $4,000 annually could afford a $13,000 house. Banks approved mortgages at 3 times salary. Today, that same factory job adjusted for inflation should pay about $50,000. The house should cost $150,000. Instead, it costs $1.2 million. Housing prices increased 24 times faster than they should have based on income growth. This isn't inflation, this is asset price explosion fueled by low interest rates, speculative investment, and limited supply. Inflation affects consumer goods. What happened to housing is a complete decoupling from wages that makes homeownership impossible for the working class. Tuition at University of Toronto in 1960 cost about $500 per year for full-time study. Room and board added another $800. A student could work full-time over the summer, earning $1.50 per hour, save $1,500, and pay for tuition, housing, and books with money left over. Students graduated debt-free. Today, University of Toronto tuition costs $15,000 per year for domestic students. Room and board adds $15,000 more. Total annual cost is $30,000. A student working full-time summer at $20 per hour earns about $8,000 before tax. That covers less than one semester. 4 years of university costs $120,000 and requires massive student loans. But here's the generational theft. Boomers paid $500 for university, graduated debt-free, and walked into jobs that paid enough to buy houses in 5 years. Millennials and Gen Z pay $60,000 for the same degree, graduate with crippling debt, and walk into jobs that don't cover rent. The education costs 120 times more, while the economic outcome is worse. The degree isn't 120 times better. The job market isn't 120 times stronger. The only thing that changed is tuition extraction increased while student financial aid didn't keep pace. Universities realized they could charge anything because student loans made price irrelevant to consumers at point of sale. When you put all these prices together, $1 in 1960 had purchasing power equivalent to about $20 today. But that's just the average. For specific items, the gap is much worse. That 1960 dollar bought 5 loaves of bread. Today you need $15. That's a 15-to-1 ratio. That 1960 dollar bought 3 gallons of gas. Today you need $20. That's a 20-to-1 ratio. That 1960 dollar bought a movie ticket with change left over. Today you need $18. That's an 18-to-1 ratio. That 1960 dollar paid for half a restaurant meal. Today you need $35. That's a 35-to-1 ratio. The average is 20-to-1, but the range is 15-to-1 to 35-to-1 depending on the category. This matters because inflation isn't uniform. Food, energy, housing, and education inflated faster than wages. Entertainment, electronics, and manufactured goods inflated slower. Your budget gets destroyed by the categories that inflated fastest. Here's the brutal economic reality. In 1960, the average Canadian worker earned about $4,200 per year. Adjusted for official inflation, that should equal about $42,000 today. The actual average wage today is $60,000, which seems like progress until you compare purchasing power. That 1960 worker earning $4,200 could buy a house for $13,000. 3 times annual salary. Today's worker earning $60,000 faces houses at $1.2 million. 20 times annual salary, wages went up 14 times, house prices went up 90 times. The gap is insurmountable. But here's what happened to create this gap. Productivity increased massively between 1960 and today. Workers produce more value per hour now than in 1960 due to technology, automation, and efficiency improvements. That productivity gain should have translated to proportional wage increases. It didn't. Between 1960 and 2025, worker productivity increased about 250%. If wages tracked productivity, the average worker should earn $150,000 today. Instead, they earn $60,000. The productivity gains went to corporate profits and asset appreciation instead of wages. Workers create more value, but capture less of it. The economic model that worked in 1960 is dead. You cannot replicate your grandparents' path to prosperity because the math no longer works. They bought houses at 3 times salary. You face houses at 20 times salary. They paid for university with summer jobs. You need 6-figure debt. They lived on single incomes. You need 2 incomes plus side hustles to survive. But here's what nobody tells you about these comparisons. Your grandparents weren't smarter or harder working. They weren't more financially responsible. They just lived in an economy where labor had more bargaining power. Housing was abundant relative to demand. Education was subsidized, and inflation was lower. The system changed. Wages stagnated while assets appreciated. Housing became an investment vehicle instead of shelter. Education became a debt trap instead of opportunity. The dollar lost 95% of its purchasing power, while wages only doubled. These aren't personal failures. These are systemic changes that make the 1960 lifestyle mathematically impossible today. Your dollar buys less than 1/20th of what it bought in 1960. Your wages buy less housing than in 1960. Your education costs more and delivers less economic security. The entire structure of economic opportunity shifted against labor and toward capital. The prices from 1960 aren't nostalgic curiosities. They're evidence of an economic transformation that destroyed the purchasing power of money, made homeownership impossible for the working class, and required 2-income households to achieve what one income easily provided 65 years ago. That's not progress. That's a massive transfer of wealth from labor to assets disguised as inflation.